Cheers, guys. Epics 911, welcome to the Sunday, August 13th, 2017 edition of VR News. Gonna stick to the same format as last Sunday's episode. I think that worked out really well. Typically Sundays, they're really slow for news. Instead of doing a second video on all the games released that week, high profile, hidden gems, etc., I rolled it into that and had the games up front. The only thing I'm going to do different this week is have the games on the tail end. So if you're just here for the news, you don't have to get bored with the details of the games. But if you want to, you can just stick around after. So with that said, guys, let's dive into this week's virtual reality news, starting with Oculus. Oculus has detailed their buffered haptics feature in really good detail for developers. You can check that out online or via their downloaded SDK. The two approaches for that, buffered haptics, which is the faster method, also able to do just really freaking cool things with buffered haptics. For example, imagine you're playing a sword combat game, Gorn, Vanishing Realms, whatever. You've got a shield in your left hand, a sword in your right. You're fighting an enemy orc, he swings, you parry the blow with your sword. You feel the haptic feedback as it clangs your sword in your right controller. Then as his sword slides down the length of yours and goes thudding into your shield, you feel the haptic of that in your left controller. I just think that would be so freaking cool and really add to the immersion factor for combat in virtual reality. And then, of course, the second type, unbuffered, just think of that as your drop-dead simple haptic feedback. In, out, done. What Oculus has done, like I said, is they've put it online. They've also included the documentation for that in the SDK, as well as an example. So where I just talked about the sword and shield, well, they've included example for exactly that. So if you are a developer, you want to code something similar, you'll be able to do that panning from one controller to the other via those instructions and the SDK. Next up, I talked about the Dota.to championships and the code modifications that were going to allow people to log in with friends up to 15 max and watch the Dota.to championships live. HTC taking that whole promotion one step further and offering up an HTC Vive system via a draw. To qualify, you basically got to go to the webpage, and I'll have the link in the description below, and click on Twitter feeds. Basically, follow those Twitter feeds, and each follow, I think they've got 5 or 6, is technically a draw into this lottery for the system. And then the last requirement, I believe, is a tweet or retweeting something that they've said to everyone that follows you. Now, I'm going to do this not just for fun. I already have an HTC Vive, but if the remote off chance I do that, I'm going to put that up as a giveaway, which I think would be really freaking cool because we're hitting some cool milestones very shortly, which is awesome. And the last news story before we jump into the games for this week, some fantastic sales going on for some virtual reality games. And like with the games that I'm going to cover for the week, these are the ones cherry-picked, either really highly favored, reviewed, or hidden gems. And the first of those, of course, Rez Infinite, 20% off via Steam, $24.99 down to $19.99. Next up, Rick and Morty, that one's 25% off, so you can grab that for $22. House of the Dying Sun, a space combat sim-style game. That one is 50% off, $20 down to $10 US. That one I can definitely recommend, especially at that price. And then the last one is Craft Keep VR. I first saw Bumble playing this, and I thought it was pretty good, even though it was a lot earlier, the version that he played. Well, as you can tell from the title, it involves crafting, but again, looked like a lot of fun. That one, $15 down to $10. That's 33% off. All right, guys, that's it for the news for this Sunday. Let's dive into some of the games released this week or coming up within the next few weeks. And this first game, looking very interesting at first glance, combines escape room puzzles with action sequences. Haven't tried it yet myself, but according to a review that I was reading on VR Focus, the non-escape room puzzle action sequences aren't as much fun or as well thought out as the escape room puzzles themselves. Now, unfortunately, according to that same reviewer, the game only supports teleportation for locomotion. The review also indicating that the touchpad super busy, 4 functions assigned to it. Literally every direction on the touchpad a different function. Now, in the game, you play the part of a time agent. You're traveling to different time periods within the same house. It's an episodic game from developer Whale Rock Games. The one big complaint from the reviewer seems to be that the puzzles could have been better thought out, so perhaps a pickup when it goes on sale. Either way, to me, somebody who loves real life room puzzle games, this doesn't look too bad. And this next game, it's called The Tower. Mentioned it in yesterday's news, but let's discuss it in a bit more detail. So in this game, you are riding a conveyor belt type apparatus through a fictional series of parapets of a tower complex. Now, as you're going through this, you've got to avoid tricks, traps. That can be as straightforward as ducking or changing conveyor lanes by sidestepping, or as complex as laying prone. If you're knocked off or fall off it, you die and you have to start back at the nearest checkpoint. Locations that update as you go through the game. A run through takes about 45 minutes. I've read some reviews. They definitely sound favorable. The review does stress, however, that you really need to make sure you have the room in your game to avoid hitting objects. Next up, we have Rez Infinite. This one from Monsters Inc. and Resonair. Rez Infinite is the PC version of a game that came out on the PlayStation VR PC version, adding a bunch of extras. For starters, if you're playing the non-VR version, you're going to be able to go up to 4K, which is nice. Game itself, if you're playing it in VR, just simply a magical experience. And it's one of those games where the visuals alone just don't do the game justice. I've got it for the PlayStation VR, and I can attest to it being extremely worthwhile for the PlayStation. However, on the PC, a whole different game altogether. You can pick it up for $10 cheaper there. As soon as I can afford it, I'm going to get it for the PC. Next game is Neptune Flux. This one is from developer Zoxide Games. Puts you in the role of an underwater explorer. You're exploring a mysterious location in the depths of the ocean. According to reviews, it amounts to roughly an hour of gameplay, but according to that same review, it is extremely atmospheric and engaging. For me, however, right on that boundary where price-wise it would have to be really good to consider it. So I'm definitely going to do some more research myself. The game was released on August 8th, 2017. Supports the PlayStation VR's tracked controllers. Pretty much locomotion option, we're talking directional steering. So you're basically steering yourself throughout the experience. Again, that's Zoxide Games Neptune Flux. And finally, our last game. This is Ultrawings from developer BitPlanet Games. It's described as the first aerial-themed open-world game where you pilot multiple aircraft to complete a variety of missions across an island-themed world. So here's the features. 3 distinctly different airplanes throughout the experience. You've also got 3 different islands that you're going to be doing those missions on. Do missions successfully, you earn money that you can spend on upgrades. Upgrades could be airplane components or airports. A variety of missions. You've got popping balloons, snapping photos, spot landings, trick landings, ring navigation, as well as a full voiceover to guide you through the experience. Well, guys, that is it for the games for this week. And our weekend draws to a close. Hopefully you guys had a kick-arse weekend, work week ahead of you, whatever. Maybe you've got a week of holidays. Whatever it is, enjoy. As always, guys, cheers.